welcome to Mr. Jim Winburn.
Thank you very much. I have to appreciate that being here in UK has been one hell of an experience. You guys have been great, and I really appreciate it, and so does everybody and every actor that's been here. So if you want, I'll turn it over to you. You can ask questions or how the direction we go.
Well, we have Tim on a roving mic down here. So if you have a question for Jim, or there's any burning thing that you want to ask about Halloween or any of the other movies he's worked in with John Carpenter, please do so. Jim, a question from me. Looking at that series of clips that we've just seen, you can drive a car and you can crash a car. You can drive a bike and you can crash a bike. You can fall from a high building. It seems like you've set yourself on fire. These are all the things in a stuntman's toolbox. And is that all the things that you did? You were able to do all of that?
Well, there's always a beginning. I was very fortunate because a lot of the older stunt guys that came out of the 40s and 50s after I got out of the United States Air Force took me under their arms and they trained me. They gave me all the knowledge of horse work, wagon work, turnover, firefighting, all this stuff. Then other guys in the industry taught me cars, bikes, high falls, fire, and all it goes on and on and on. Education never stops when you're doing stunt work and motion pictures. Everybody has a different type of situation in a film or a TV show, how they want to shoot it. And you have to go that direction. So your talent has to train that way for that scene. So no one gets hurt, safety first. So I was very fortunate for the 52 years that I was in the stuntman in the business, and it was a learning cycle every day. All over the world I worked. I was very fortunate, the people I doubled calling me back, and I learned so much from the local stunt guys from different countries. And I even trained a lot of them for safety and a lot of other situations. So no, it was a constant education system for me.
Having achieved all those things, and having achieved all those things, and having gained all that experience, is that what made John Carpenter want to hire you for the first Halloween film? Because you could pretty much do anything.
Well, Deborah Hill, who was the writer and producer with John, we did about 5 or 6 low-budget films for Don Edmund's production Mustang, which were action shows, and I coordinated and second-year director and drive and did stunt work on it. So Deborah Hill and I became great friends because she would, an AD, and she was an exceptionally great lady in production value. She would do all the paperwork to save me, so when we turned the films over and into the distribution, into the editorial, that they had the paperwork of how we shot, what we shot, the lens sizes, all the different things. So Deborah Hill was a big positive thing in all those films. Now later on, she and John Carpenter got together. I was on my way doing all kinds of stuff. And I was under contract at Warner Brothers doing Police Story. I was one of the guys that drove the police cars doing chase scenes and all this stuff. Every once in a while, I put a uniform on and did a little acting. She called me and asked me if I would come to Hollywood and at the location and talk to John because they had a problem. So I got off of the production and I went and drove up to Hollywood on Orange Grove Avenue, and I met Deborah. And while we were there, Donald Pleasance showed up, and about 2 months earlier, Don and I worked at Universal together, so it was great getting back with him again. But they came out of the house, I met John for the first time. John took me by the hand. We went upstairs and he told me what he wanted. Then he told me the problems he had, which was liability. For a $300,000 film, which they had no more money, they had to wrap the show within the following week, and they didn't want anybody to get hurt, and they didn't want lawsuits and destroy the film product. So we went through it, and I asked Dean Cunny, the cameraman, and Don Barons, the production manager, and all the crew guys, we sit there and they watched and talked. So I told them, I can do it for what you want to do it and how you want to do it, except you have to follow my direction. So they said, you got it. So anyway, I set up the situation with the camera people and everything. We shot it with 3 cameras. One, as I went through the door, one on the lower side, one on the ground over the stunt porter pit, which was foam rubber, which we put under coffee cups so the air would go down and not up, and I wouldn't go back in front of camera, and it was a clean shot. We did it in one take, and it was a wrap. And I went back to Warner Brothers. So I did it for Deborah Hill and the crew.
In establishing that relationship with John Carpenter, you then went on to work with him on The Fog.
Yes.
And also Escape from New York. Yeah. Escape from New York is an action movie, in every way. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the things that he was asking you to do. Was it similar to Halloween, or were all those 3 films different types of jobs for you?
Well, first of all, if you've been involved in films, all techniques are basically the same. It's just how and the position you put the camera and effects. Now, I was brought into Fog by Deborah Hill again, and I was running shows in Los Angeles and putting up action shows for Universal Studio. And she asked me if I'd come up above San Francisco to work on Fog. So I told her I was working a lot of jobs and you were better off to get somebody else. She said, no, I want you. She was very loyal. So I said, well, I'll fly you up to San Francisco. You drive up the location. We'll fly you back from San Francisco to Burbank. You work for the next 3 or 4 nights. And I said, okay. So that's what we were doing. So what I did on Fog was the special effects with the vehicles and stuff where the fog would chase people like the truck. As the pickup truck went, the fog was chasing it. We did with reverse film and stuff like that. That was why I was up there, because of the technology that I had with the equipment and stunt driving and all the other stuff. But then John wanted me to stay up there. And I told him I couldn't, so that kind of broke up our friendship at that moment. So I went back to Hollywood and doing my thing. A number of months later, or whatever it was, they did Escape from New York with Kurt Russell. And Dick Warlock was the coordinator on the show. And Deborah Hill wanted me to coordinate her on the show, but I couldn't do it. And so they went to St. Louis and did all kinds of prep stuff with the buildings that they were tearing down on the riverfront. Then they came back to California, and now they're in San Pedro. And the last shot of the whole movie was the raft out in the middle of the bay that gets blown out of the water by the helicopter. Well, Deborah wanted me to come in and do all the special effects, all the action stuff with the helicopter, so no one get hurt on the situation of firing the flares and all this stuff. Well, when I got to location, nobody knew that I was going to be there. And they were kind of surprised. So anyway, John didn't quite know what to say, but Deborah did. So with the helicopter guys, special effects, we went out in the bay and we scored everything, how we were going to shoot it. And we shot it, and I triggered all the stuff, blew me out of the water, et cetera, and that ended. Then we went back on shore. When I got back on shore, nobody was there. They were all gone. And I signed a contract, and I went home. That's the only thing I did on Escape from New York.
It's interesting to hear you speak about Deborah, because it's very easy for all of us who are fans of John Carpenter's films to only focus on John, and Deborah was a huge part of those movies, and I think you're very keen to stress that. How big an influence did she have on your career or your life? Was it just those movies, or did it go a bit deeper than that?
Well, as I said, I met Deborah on Don Edmund's Mustang production, and she was an AD on the show, a non-union, and we became great friends. What Deborah brought to the industry is what the good old boys in Hollywood didn't want. They didn't want women in the different areas of production as producers, directors, coordinators, and stuff on film. And with the talent she had, we became great friends. And we worked many, many hours on various scripts that she was working on with other companies and stuff like that. But I don't know if she was a big mentor to my career, because I was working all over the world when I knew Deborah. And so it was a loyalty thing, because she was so talented. And there's so many women in the motion picture business at that time that couldn't get a job because the good old boys club would keep them back because of whatever reason. She broke that mold when she did those films and Halloween and all the stuff that followed. So I was very proud of her for what she did. And I don't know, maybe she thought maybe I was giving her information. And I don't know, she was a wonderful lady, and I kind of miss her dearly, because we did a lot of stuff together. Now, Carpenter and her were a great team, but like everybody in the business of motion picture, everybody wants to climb the ladder to success. John is no different as anybody else. But Deborah Hill was one great lady in coming into the business, and what she did, the awards and all the shows she did. She opened the door for those women to be directors, producers, production managers, other than makeup and wardrobe.
Any questions for Jim? First of all, on Halloween, playing the shape, any of that? Jim, one of the things I wanted to ask was, coming into Halloween so quickly and having to do the work so quickly and then leaving so quickly, were you able to get a handle on what the film was about, the impact of the film, the mood of the film, or were you in and out so quick that you weren't able to pick that up?
Well, Deborah Hill later on gave me a script, but it was too late for what I did in the film. When I did the Fall and played Michael Myers, it was only for one reason. It's because the crew was in trouble with Deborah Hill and John, and the liability of that film, that they couldn't afford a injury and lawsuits, because it was a $300,000 film, and the production value was being all used. And they had to release the film for Halloween of that year by the distribution of the two agents. So I really didn't know anything about the characters of that film. To me, it was just another horror movie that people were trying to capitalize on at that period of time. So I did it, when I went down there and did it, I did it for Deborah, I did it for the crew because they were good friends of mine, Don Barons, and the camera people, and John, because they needed help, and I was there, and I respected them. So that's all I knew at that time. And I have to say this, which you probably might be upset or not, I don't know. I have never seen any of the Halloween films. So I work in the business, I was working all the time, and I didn't have time to visualize everything I worked on. But on the Halloween films, I've never seen any of them. Only the bits and pieces that the editorial people gave me for my resume. And that's it.
One thing I am interested to explore is when you said that you were doing TV shows and occasionally you would put on a costume and do some acting. So here you were wearing a costume and you were doing some acting, but in essence, because there was no face, you were miming. And I wonder whether Carpenter or Deborah or anybody gave you any directions as to how they wanted you to move or to embody the character of Michael Myers.
Well, when I was on the set and talking to John and everybody, we went to and watched the playbacks of Tommy Lee Wallace and the people that played Michael Myers up to that point where they brought me in. And the way that John wanted him to walk, the way John wanted him to move, the way Deborah wanted him to walk, the way they wanted him to move. And I saw it on video. And then John wanted that Michael Myers do the same thing in the air when he's falling. He didn't want a guy out of control, waving his arms, yelling, screaming, and doing that. He wanted Michael Myers, the same character, in the middle of the fall. And that's what we did. And so everybody was satisfied with that. But no, the only thing I saw was some clips of Tommy Lee Wallace and a few of the other people that played Michael Myers at the very beginning of the film.
Fantastic. We're going to end it there, but as a final clip element, we're going to show a little bit more from Jim's career as he leaves the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the very wonderful Mr. Jim Winburn. Jim Winburn, everyone.